Bonjour à tous, j'espère que vous allez bien. Bienvenue à cette 5e conférence, en fait, ping-pong. Ce soir, on accueille Zébulon Perron. Juste pour vous dire, la conférence va durer environ 1 heure. Et pour ceux qui sont toujours en train de se joindre à nous, juste ne pas oublier de fermer vos caméras et micros. La conférence est aussi diffusée sur la page Facebook de l'École de design et un petit rappel que la conférence est enregistrée. Donc, retour sur ping-pong. Ping-pong, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est une série de conférences où un ancien étudiant de l'école invite quelqu'un avec qui il a envie d'avoir une discussion, soit quelqu'un qui admire, quelqu'un avec qui il a envie de collaborer, bref, quelqu'un qui l'inspire. Et nous, en fait, on a accès à la pensée de ces deux créateurs unis. Donc, juste pour vous mentionner que la conférence ce soir, étant donné qu'en fait, notre invité est Zébulon Perron et qu'il invite Craig Stanghetta, le début de la conférence va être effectué en français et la deuxième partie va être effectuée en anglais. S'il y a quoi que ce soit, on pourra traduire pour vous certaines parties, aucun problème. Juste vous dire aussi, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à utiliser l'outil de conversation de Zoom ou Facebook, pardon, nous tenterons de répondre aux questions à la fin de la conférence, c'est-à-dire qu'on va cumuler les questions et on va les transmettre à la fin de la conférence. En gros, bienvenue à Zébulon. Juste pour vous dire, c'est la première fois qu'on accueille Zébulon à l'UQAM. C'est vraiment un plaisir. Et Zébulon, en fait, est passé, pour la petite anecdote, à peu près en même temps que moi. Je ne sais pas, est-ce que j'ai oublié de me présenter? Guillaume Sasseville, en fait, professeur à l'École de design. Et je suis aussi passé par cette école il y a bien des années et Zébulon et moi étions dans la même classe. Nous avons même partagé, en fait, un cours et étions en équipe dans, si je me rappelle bien, un cours avec Borcure. Donc, retour à Zébulon. Juste pour vous dire, je suis très admiratif du travail de Zébulon. C'est absolument incroyable ce qu'il accomplit, en fait, ce qu'il a accompli et ce qu'il accomplit toujours. Pour en faire un résumé rapide, Zébulon a fréquenté l'Université de Concordia et l'École de design au programme de design de l'environnement. Et je vous dirais que ce qui résume principalement sa pratique, c'est que c'est un des principaux acteurs de la création du nightlife à Montréal, en fait, l'aspect aménagement. Sans le savoir, en fait, ceux qui ne le connaissent pas, vous avez fort déjà probablement fréquenté une des multiples adresses créées par Zébulon et son équipe. C'est aussi quelqu'un, en fait, hier, on discutait rapidement avec Zébulon, il m'a un peu décrit son parcours, des sections que je ne connaissais pas. Et ce qui a vraiment lancé, en fait, le cœur de sa pratique, c'est une collaboration. Avant de lancer son studio en 2008, l'atelier Zébulon Perron, Zébulon, en fait, a lancé un studio avec son frère Willow Perron, où il était appelé à faire une direction artistique très, très large pour des marques issues de l'univers de la mode. Donc, c'était autant designer les vêtements que tout l'aspect design graphique, que justement tout le volet aménagement. Et ce qui conserve de cette époque-là, c'est vraiment cette curiosité multidisciplinaire, ce qui fait qu'à chacun des projets qu'il va travailler encore aujourd'hui, il intègre cette notion d'ultime customisation des détails du mobilier. C'est vraiment un designer très versatile qui travaille à plusieurs échelles. Donc, vraiment, pour moi, c'est vraiment un plaisir qu'il soit avec nous ce soir. Je vous dis 3 lignes sur son invité, Craig Stanghetta. En fait, Craig Stanghetta, c'est un designer qui est né à Sault-Sainte-Marie, en Ontario. Il a étudié en art visuel et théâtre à l'Université de Toronto pour se retrouver par la suite à Vancouver. Et avoir finalement, il a un passé d'acteur. Il confirmera si ce passé-là est toujours actif ou pas. Mais bref, de fil en aiguille, s'est retrouvé à travailler sur des projets de scéno, ce qui l'a amené à travailler lui aussi sur des projets d'aménagement. Il est même, en fait, une petite quote, il est classé 39e par le magazine annuel Power 50 de Vancouver comme étant un de ceux qui a changé le vocabulaire de l'hôtellerie de la ville de Vancouver. Donc là, vous commencez à voir le parallèle entre Zébulon et Craig Stanghetta. Disons que c'est deux personnes qui ont un impact énorme sur la nuit de la ville. Donc, je vous les présente. En fait, Zébulon, si tu veux te joindre à nous, ce serait avec grand plaisir que tu peux commencer ta présentation. Zébulon va nous présenter son travail et par la suite, Greg va se joindre à nous pour entamer la discussion avec Zébulon.
Bonjour Guillaume.
Allô Zébulon, j'ai oublié de
bien?
dire un seul truc en fait. C'est à quel point justement tu es engagé dans cette ville. Je pense que ça arrivé multiples fois que je t'ai croisé assis à un des bars de tes restos en train de décider ton prochain projet. Donc, pour ceux qui ne le connaissaient pas, vous allez peut-être vous apercevoir que vous l'avez croisé plus d'une fois avec un carnet de croquis au bar en train de dessiner.
Je get high on my own supply. Merci Guillaume pour cette introduction, ma foi. Je me présente, moi c'est Zébulon Perron. Je suis le fondateur puis le directeur créatif de l'Atelier Zébulon Perron, l'atelier éponyme. Ça fait une vingtaine d'années, un petit peu plus que 20 ans que je travaille dans le monde du design. Comme Guillaume le mentionnait, j'ai eu, au début de ma carrière, j'ai fait différents trucs. On a travaillé en graphisme, on a dessiné des vêtements. Quand je dis j'avais une compagnie avec mon frère, donc j'ai même travaillé pour une compagnie de software où je dessinais des interfaces usagées. Mais tout ce moment, pendant toutes ces expériences-là, j'avais toujours quand même la composante architecturale ou design d'intérieur qui était présente dans ma vie. Donc, ça a été une constante, dans ma carrière. Donc, voilà, j'ai décidé de vous présenter un peu mon travail ou le travail de mon atelier d'une façon assez linéaire, chronologique. Puis, pour pouvoir parler d'une couple de notre approche à travers le temps, puis des moments importants. Donc, c'est tous des projets qui ont eu un impact sur la suite pour nous. Je commence en disant que le premier projet que j'ai fait, je l'ai fait pendant que j'étais encore à l'UQAM, en train d'étudier. J'ai fait un restaurant qui est sur la rue Mont-Royal. Où j'étais encore étudiant, puis c'est là où j'ai fait un peu toutes mes erreurs. Donc, pas toutes mes erreurs, j'en fais encore beaucoup, mais je veux dire, j'ai fait beaucoup d'erreurs importantes à ce moment-là dans ce projet-là. Donc, quand on a fait le projet, quand le projet a finalement ouvert, c'est un restaurant qui s'appelait Les Folies sur Montréal, qui est mort de sa belle mort finalement. Je ne suis pas si malheureux que ça, je vous avoue. J'ai fait beaucoup d'erreurs au niveau... j'ai compris beaucoup de choses dans ce projet-là parce que il n'était pas fait pour vivre comme un restaurant. Fait qu'il n'était pas conçu avec l'usure en tête. Il y a beaucoup de gens qui viennent, puis ça dépérit rapidement les restaurants parce que il y a beaucoup de gens qui passent par là, puis c'est dur sur la matière. Donc, ça a nourri beaucoup de mes idées par rapport à la durabilité puis la façon de concevoir les choses dans un contexte comme celui-là. Puis, j'ai fait l'autre erreur, c'est que c'était pas périn en termes de style non plus. C'était très du moment à l'époque. Et puis, donc, ça m'a fait beaucoup réfléchir parce que j'ai vu ce truc-là vieillir très rapidement puis devenir un peu désuet très rapidement. Puis, je me suis dit, c'est peut-être pas la façon la plus pertinente de faire des projets quand on pense durabilité. Puis quand je parle de durabilité, je parle de durabilité sur plein d'aspects, durabilité de la construction, puis de la matière, puis de qualité de l'assemblage, puis tout ça, mais aussi durabilité du style ou de la proposition pour qu'elle soit pérenne. Donc, voilà. J'ai parti mon atelier en 2008. Je vais vous partager mon écran avec comme premier projet peut-être un endroit que vous connaissez peut-être qui s'appelle la buvette chez Simone. Je vais partager ça. Donc, vous voyez mon écran, Guillaume, c'est bon?
Oui.
Oui, merci. Donc, évidemment, mon atelier, ça s'appelle l'Atelier Zébulon Perron. Et puis, je rentre tout de suite dans le vif du sujet. La buvette, chez Simone, c'est un bar à vin sur l'avenue du Parc qui est ouvert en 2008. Et puis, c'est le premier projet où j'ai pu tester des idées que j'avais depuis longtemps au sujet de l'aménagement d'espace dans un contexte comme celui-là. L'idée étant que comment on fait par l'entremise du mobilier, en disposant les choses d'une certaine façon pour favoriser la rencontre, favoriser le rapprochement, s'assurer qu'il y a une genre de dynamique, d'énergie dans l'espace. Puis donc, je peux vous montrer, j'ai mis le plan ici pour vous expliquer un peu comme certains des principes qui me trottaient dans la tête à l'époque. L'idée, bon, évidemment, du bar central, de décoller le bar du mur, pour que les gens puissent comme se rassembler autour d'un lieu qui puisse se voir à les niveaux. Comme si vous pouvez voir derrière le bar, on monte. Donc, il y a comme un phénomène de gradin, si on veut, pour les gens qui sont derrière le bar debout, pour connecter avec la salle. Les tables en T qu'on voit ici sur les images, ça, c'était très efficace pour pouvoir, souvent on assoyait, Simone ou quelqu'un qui travaillait là, pouvait asseoir différents groupes, 2 ou 3 groupes différents sur des tables comme ça. Puis inévitablement, ce qu'on a constaté, c'est qu'inévitablement, les gens ils finissent par se parler. C'est une histoire de distance. Donc, moi, j'ai beaucoup réfléchi à ça. J'ai beaucoup étudié cette question-là de ce qu'on a décidé d'appeler l'ergonomie sociale. C'est-à-dire que la forme est toujours, pour moi, au service de l'échange, au service du contact, au service du rapprochement. Fait qu'à partir de là, la prémisse, c'est-à-dire que la forme est générée par la notion d'être avec l'autre. Fait que pour nous, notre pratique, comme designer, c'est de proposer une façon d'être avec l'autre. Donc, voilà. Fait qu'il y avait beaucoup il y a des petits trucs inusités, je sais pas, des petits bouts de barre qui tournent, puis bon, c'est toujours pour comme pouvoir poser un verre ou on évite les cul-de-sac comme ça, surtout dans des endroits comme ça où les gens butinent ou vont se lever, vont aller parler à des gens, mais si tu fais le tour de la salle puis tu arrives dans un cul-de-sac avec ton verre puis tu es obligé de te retourner de bar, c'est plate. Fait qu'on essaie de faire en sorte que la circulation continue et fluide pour éviter des situations gênantes des fois. Donc voilà. Fait que c'était un projet aussi important parce que on a fait ça avec les moyens du bar. Comme vous pouvez voir, il y a des extensions, on n'avait pas d'argent pour bouger les lumières et tout ça. Fait qu'on a dû trouver des solutions qui étaient en lien avec le lieu, avec le budget, avec les conditions de projet. Puis donc, ça m'amène à dire qu'on a une pratique, puis j'ai développé ça avec le temps, on a une pratique qui est profondément contextuelle. C'est-à-dire que le contexte du projet, que ce soit l'espace physique, que ce soit les intentions de la personne, de mon client, que ce soit des conditions budgétaires, que ce soit la position géographique dans la ville, tout ça, c'est pris en compte pour générer le projet. Donc, on ne part jamais avec une idée préconçue ou un parti formel. Donc, moi, j'essaie en tout cas de ne pas avoir une signature reconnaissable. C'est sûr qu'on a toujours des réflexes, puis on a des façons de faire, travailler avec le métal, mais tous les projets sont adaptés à leur contexte. Donc, un autre projet qui a été important dans notre parcours, c'est le Furco et le Café Parvis. Je les mets ensemble parce que c'est un peu ils sont frères et sœurs. Furco, c'était un projet qui a précédé de quelques années le Café Parvis. Dans ce projet-là, on a appliqué les mêmes idées sur l'ergonomie sociale, sur le dynamisme dans l'espace, puis entre les convives, puis tout ça. Mais aussi, on peut voir ici qu'il y a eu une volonté aussi de préserver ou d'utiliser ce qui était là. Fait qu'on a fait comme de la démolition sélective. On a trouvé en dessous cet espace-là ressemblait à un blockbuster avant. C'était des plafonds suspendus, du gyps partout. Fait qu'on a comme enlevé des couches pour révéler ce qui était en dessous. Puis ce qu'on a trouvé, c'était assez intéressant pour moi parce que il y avait une valeur là-dedans. La valeur des couches successives, des choses qui se sont passées là. Puis pour moi, ça, c'est comme un des principes un peu de notre façon d'approcher les projets, c'est qu'on a comme un devoir de préservation. S'il y a des choses qui sont bonnes, on les garde. Surtout quand on travaille dans des locaux existants. Ce n'est pas toujours le cas. Des fois, on travaille dans du neuf, mais là, c'était un local, c'était un édifice historique du tournant du siècle. Donc, on a travaillé avec ça. Puis, moi, je trouvais qu'il y avait un intérêt dans la matière, l'énergie dans la matière, puis aussi comme la notion de la mémoire du lieu, la notion que des gens qui sont passés par là avant. Je pense qu'il y a quelque chose de profondément, pour moi en tout cas, de profondément humain là-dedans, de savoir qu'il y a des gens qui sont passés là avant, fait que ça nous connecte à notre propre mortalité, puis ça fait en sorte que puis par conséquent à notre humanité. Puis je pense que dans ce sens-là, les traces de l'histoire, les traces du passage des autres amènent beaucoup d'âme dans les projets. Puis ça, c'est très difficile à reproduire de toutes pièces. Café Parvis, encore là, on a préservé des choses, on a préservé les moulures, on a préservé des murs, on a préservé tout le plancher d'origine. C'était des anciens entrepôts de fourrures, parce qu'on est dans le quartier des fourrures de Montréal. D'ailleurs, c'est pour ça que ça s'appelle le Furco. Le Furco, c'était le HQ du Canadian Fur Company, donc le Furco. On avait trouvé un ancien coffre-fort à manteau de fourrure sur lequel il y avait cette inscription-là. Puis donc, c'est pour ça qu'on a décidé de l'appeler le Furco. Peut-être une petite parenthèse par rapport à ces deux projets-là. C'est des projets que j'ai initiés personnellement. Donc, je suis aussi copropriétaire dans certaines des réalisations qu'on a fait. C'est le cas du Furco puis du Café Parvis. Ça fait que ça nous donne un certain aussi contrôle par rapport à la proposition du projet. Puis donc, moi, j'avais trouvé ces locaux-là, j'ai trouvé intéressant, j'ai convaincu la gang de la buvette avec qui on avait eu énormément de succès. Quand la buvette s'est ouverte, ça a été un succès retentissant. Puis donc, on a décidé de partir en affaires ensemble et d'ouvrir ces deux places-là. Écoutez, certains détails, dans les deux projets, on voit du côté droit, c'est le Café Parvis, du côté gauche, c'est le Furco. Et voici le plan. Quand je vous parlais d'ergonomie sociale, bien évidemment, à chaque fois qu'on peut rassembler des gens alentour de standing bar, ici, c'est un coin très populaire, les gens ils posent leur verre, on voit des petites protubérances des fois qui aident les gens à exister dans cet espace-là, s'accoter, poser quelque chose, grignoter quoi. Puis aussi la notion des niveaux assez importante pour pouvoir faire en sorte de réussir à connecter les gens autour, évidemment, d'un bar, dans ce cas-ci central, qui a une forme atypique, mais qui connecte toutes sortes de choses, puis qui agit comme un genre qui est là pour articuler l'espace. Donc, c'est bien quand on peut le faire, de prendre les gens en charge dans ce genre d'aménagement-là, pour moi. Un autre projet qui a été bien important pour nous, c'est le Red Bull Music Academy. J'aimerais ça vous en parler. Il y a plein d'affaires à dire là-dessus, mais je pense que je n'ai pas beaucoup de temps aujourd'hui pour développer. Mais Red Bull nous ont approchés pour faire l'académie. C'est un gros événement ambulant qui a fait plein de villes, des villes importantes, New York, Tokyo, Paris, ainsi de suite. Qui est débarqué à Montréal il y a quelques années, puis je cherchais quelqu'un puis donc, c'est un événement qui est basé alentour d'une académie. Donc, il y a plein de jeunes talents prometteurs musiciens qui viennent à Montréal. Ils sont 60, puis il faut créer un lieu, genre de fantasme, où il y a des conférences. Ça, c'est la salle de conférence. Il y a eu des conférences avec Björk, avec d'autres artistes. Puis donc, ces jeunes musiciens-là sont là, puis on a créé 10 studios, une genre de cafétéria, un grand studio pour enregistrer avec des orchestres, tout ça au centre-Phi. On a tout démoli le deuxième étage, on a refait c'est vraiment un genre d'événementiel, mais c'est aussi une expérience hyper immersive où on nous demandait de créer des lieux, mais on avait été approché justement pour cette idée que oui, il y a quelque chose qui se passe dans les studios, mais ce qui est le plus important dans l'académie, c'est ce qui se passe à l'extérieur des studios. C'est les échanges, les contacts, les rencontres. Puis donc, ils nous ont demandé ils nous ont approchés pour notre expertise dans ce genre de domaine-là, puis ils nous ont demandé de créer des lieux, des petits moments pour que les gens se rencontrent, puis donc créer des collaborations musicales et autres. Un autre projet assez important dans notre parcours, c'est le nouveau restaurant et lounge et terrasse de l'hôtel Four Seasons, le Marcus, qui est le restaurant du chef Marcus Samuelsson, qui est un chef de réputation internationale qui a été mandaté pour développer le concept pour le restaurant dans le nouvel hôtel Four Seasons au centre-ville de Montréal. C'est un projet important parce que le retour du Four Seasons à Montréal, ça marquait c'est un signal important par rapport à l'état de l'économie. À Montréal, Four Seasons avait quitté dans les années 80 et de retour, c'est un marqueur important d'une économie en santé. Puis donc, nous, on a évidemment, dans ce cas-là, on n'est pas à la buvette, là, on travaille avec des matières nobles, avec des moyens qui sont très différents. Puis donc, ça nous permettait de faire ce qu'on n'avait jamais fait, c'était des gestes minimalistes. Puis je parle du minimaliste parce qu'on n'avait jamais fait quelque chose comme ça, parce qu'on n'avait jamais eu les budgets et les moyens pour le faire. Moi, j'aime bien le minimalisme, c'est pas qu'on ne veut pas en faire, c'est juste qu'on n'a pas l'occasion. Le minimaliste ne tolère pas l'erreur, ne tolère pas les déviations. Puis ça demande beaucoup d'énergie, beaucoup d'argent, c'était pas le cas de la buvette. Donc, ce que j'avais déjà raconté à Guillaume, c'est qu'à la buvette, puis dans beaucoup de projets qu'on fait, on a été obligé de développer une stratégie que j'appelais l'esthétique de l'approximatif. C'est-à-dire qu'on est obligé de build in la tolérance dans les projets parce qu'on n'a pas nécessairement les équipes ou le savoir-faire ou l'artisanat qui va nous permettre, ou l'argent déjà, parce que c'est beaucoup relié à l'argent aussi, pour faire ce genre de geste-là où les trucs tout s'alignent, puis tout est parfait, puis on fait recommencer si ça ne marche pas, puis bon, ainsi de suite. Une petite note par rapport à la buvette, c'est vraiment le cas que c'était comme approximatif au niveau esthétique, mais c'était laser au niveau de l'aménagement. Puis ça m'a permis de valider beaucoup des idées que j'avais sur l'aménagement. Puis donc, ça m'a donné beaucoup de confiance pour la suite parce que ces idées-là avaient été validées avec le succès de la buvette, avec la dynamique. Puis donc, tous les projets subséquents ont été informés par ce projet-là. C'est le cas du Marcus aussi. Si on regarde un peu, bon, il y a beaucoup de sous-espaces. Bon, on a le lounge de jour ici avec le bar. Le bar est traversant, rentre dans le lounge de nuit. Bon, évidemment, on a du verre prismatique. Après, ensuite, on a le restaurant qui est connecté sur une terrasse avec un système de nanawall, qui est un système de mur rideau qui s'enlève complètement sans meneau, comme on peut voir au bout de la photo du bas. Bon, évidemment, beaucoup de beaux détails en ébénisterie puis des choses qui sont bien réalisées. Des luminaires qu'on a faites avec Lambert et Fils sur mesure, qu'on a développé avec eux. Tous les luminaires ont été conçus et sur mesure et fabriqués, conçus sur mesure par nous et développés avec Lambert et Fils. Tous les luminaires sur mesure. Vous voyez le plan. C'est quand même grand. Là, on parle de 10 000 pieds carrés, donc 10-12 000 en tout cas. Donc, mais encore là, on peut constater que les formes ont été développées pour faire des parcours intuitifs, pour s'assurer que les gens aient des occasions de connecter, les gens qui ne se connaissent pas nécessairement. On voit qu'il y a beaucoup de petits raccoins, des trucs, fait que c'est pris en charge. Il y a quelque chose, il y a une notion de confort psychologique qui vient avec, mais aussi d'expérience, d'être pris en charge. Puis donc voilà. Puis c'est de ça qu'on parle quand on parle d'ergonomie sociale. Ensuite, le dernier projet que je vais vous présenter, c'est le centre Sanax, qui a fait l'objet d'un concours d'architecture auquel on a participé avec une boîte d'architecture qu'on aime beaucoup qui se nomme Pelletier de Fontenay et Architecture 49, qui est la boîte technique qui est avec nous. On a gagné, donc on est en plein développement de ce projet-là en ce moment. C'est un projet public avec un programme hyper ambitieux. Là, on parle d'une bibliothèque, d'un lab technologique, d'une salle de spectacle, une vraie bibliothèque municipale, des salles d'exposition, un café, et j'en passe. Donc, nous, on est ravis de pouvoir participer à ce projet-là parce que autant on aime ça faire des projets de luxe comme le Four Seasons puis tout ça, autant on est très content d'avoir l'occasion de travailler sur des projets publics au service du public. Donc, des projets qui ne sont pas dans l'exclusivité, qui sont dans l'inclusivité. Donc, on travaille sur ce projet-là en ce moment. Je peux vous montrer le plan, c'est quand même pas rien. Puis donc, c'est très excitant. C'est une commande qui vient de la Ville de Montréal. C'est sur le site de l'ancien hôpital pour enfants, dans le basilière d'un plus gros développement immobilier. Et donc, voilà. Fait qu'on se permet de pouvoir vous montrer ce projet-là aujourd'hui parce que là, c'est officiellement lancé. J'ai eu des rencontres aujourd'hui avec la Ville et les autres intervenants. Ensuite, je vous montre quelques projets avec quelques notions qui informent beaucoup notre projet. Ça, c'est un de nos derniers projets, qui est une petite pizzeria à Westmount, la pizzeria Gentile. Ça, c'est un projet où le propriétaire vient d'une famille qui sont plusieurs générations de restaurateurs et donc c'est un projet qui est ancré dans un savoir-faire, mais aussi surtout dans une mémoire, dans une nostalgie. Puis donc, il nous parlait beaucoup de son passé, des pizzerias où il allait dans le New Jersey, à New York, tout ça, parce qu'ils ont eu des restaurants là-bas. Puis, Donc, c'est rétro, c'est mnémonique dans le sens nostalgique du terme. Puis, on cherchait vraiment à créer une ambiance rétro, mais pas un pastiche. Donc, on voulait aussi aller de l'avant, faire quelque chose qui avait comme des notions contemporaines, mais avec beaucoup de clins d'œil. Donc, on voit, tu sais, mettons, avec les gestes, tout ça, que dans ce projet-là, que oui, on a cherché à avoir un équilibre entre une idée qu'on se fait d'une certaine époque, dans ce cas-ci, tu sais, la fin des années 70, le début des années 80, et quelque chose qui pourrait être vraiment profondément contemporain du moment, tu sais, puis qui va vers l'avant, qui regarde vers l'avant. Donc, il y a quelques petites choses que je peux noter qui se retrouvent dans beaucoup de nos projets. On fait souvent, les chaises sont d'origine, c'est des chaises vintage, les luminaires aussi. C'est des trucs qu'on a trouvés ça et là pour aménager le local. Puis pour moi, ces objets-là, les antiquités, les objets qu'on mène, ben ils ont déjà une âme. Pour moi, il y a de l'âme dans la matière qui a vécu. Vous le voyez au furco, puis au parvis, puis tout ça. Ça amène quelque chose qui est difficile à reproduire. Puis ensuite, on est beaucoup ancré sur le détail, comme Guillaume le mentionnait, beaucoup sur le sur-mesure. On développe beaucoup les détails, les petits détails, dans ce cas-ci, des luminaires pour plusieurs projets. Du mobilier, des tabourets, des chaises, des fauteuils, ou sinon, des fois, c'est complètement intégré, comme c'est le cas dans la salle de bain des femmes du Marcus au Four Seasons, là où on a eu l'occasion de travailler avec du terrazzo, puis avec des moyens des bons moyens pour pouvoir réaliser des trucs comme ça. Il y a d'autres projets où on va encore dans l'idée de la mémoire ou de la notion de quelque chose. Bien, ça, c'est le Iberica dans le centre-ville. On a récupéré ces luminaires-là, on ne les a pas fabriqués, c'était dans un ancien hôtel. On a récupéré les panneaux, on a récupéré les chaises, on a récupéré ça, on l'a élevé. Mais on prend cette matière première-là puis on l'applique dans un nouveau contexte pour essayer de créer un nouvel effet, mais aussi un genre de mémoire. Puis donc, ça, c'est des projets, là, ça, c'est plus des images pour l'Hôtel Germain, pour l'ambiance de certains projets, le launch de Four Seasons, l'idée de la lumière, de la matière et de toutes ces choses-là. Voilà. Fait que c'est ça résume un petit peu notre pratique. Donc, voilà. Je pense que rendu là, je pourrais vous présenter mon invité, Craig Stanghetta, qui est un designer qui fait aussi des restaurants puis des projets d'hôtellerie à Vancouver. Je l'ai rencontré il y a quelques années quand j'avais loué une maison sur l'île de Vancouver pour les vacances familiales. Et je connaissais déjà son travail un peu, mais je ne le connaissais pas lui personnellement. Je suis allé manger dans un restaurant, puis je connaissais le chef parce qu'il connaissait des gens de Montréal, puis il m'a dit « Ah, tu es designer, tu devrais rencontrer le gars au bar, c'est lui le designer du restaurant. » Puis c'était Craig Stanghetta. Craig, à mon grand plaisir, une pratique qui est très semblable à la mienne. On a tous les deux 16 employés en ce moment. On fait tous les deux des restaurants. On est tous les deux copropriétaires dans des restaurants dans nos villes respectives. Craig a une fille, moi aussi. Donc, on avait beaucoup de choses à se dire quand on s'est rencontrés. Donc, c'est pour ça que je trouvais... Puis, je pense qu'on n'avait jamais eu l'occasion de finir notre conversation. Donc, je vous présente mon invité, Craig Stanghetta, que j'ai le plaisir d'accueillir aujourd'hui. Hey, Craig!
Hello, bonjour, comment ça va?
So, I was just, on va passer maintenant à la partie anglaise de la conférence. I was just telling everyone how we met for the first time when I was on vacation in Vancouver, and how eerily similar our lives were, like a mirror, like an alter ego on the West Coast. I'm curious about how you got into this and how kind of your training as an actor and in arts influences your practice now.
Cool. I mean, I have some of the same questions for you, but I'll sort of wax poetic for a minute about how I fumbled my way into this, and then you can tell me your version. But I mean, I come from a family that's in the restaurant business and in the hotel business. Nothing glamorous. We owned a old hotel in the town that I grew up, Sault Ste. Marie, which is a steel town in northern Ontario. So it's very working class. A lot of Italian immigrants, and I'm half Italian on my dad's side, and on that side we owned an old hotel, and my family was in the restaurant business both in Italy and in Sault Ste. Marie. So I sort of grew up around that, and so as you know, being in the world of restaurants, that people who sort of end up in that world usually sort of comes from some sort of level of nostalgia or memory or connectivity to those memories that they had from when they were young. And I think some of the best food comes from that kind of type of creating from emotion, so to speak.
I think like memory is a big theme, and such an important kind of building block in the type of projects that we do. To me, it might be one of the most important things that we, either it's referential or either it's, making sure that you, I was explaining on some of the projects that we bring forth some of the architecture or the original architecture. But it's, there's energy in memory, I find, and soul.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think if there's a way to tap into that, I think that's something that we always sort of look for, and not allowing it to be kind of a theme or a sort of trying to recreate, but just trying to access that emotion. So yeah, I came from that background, and then I liked design, but it didn't seem like a viable path for me when I was younger. And so I sort of found myself in the theater as a 13, 14-year-old, and sort of took to that, and then followed that up by doing a Bachelor of Fine Arts, studying the theater in Toronto. And as a whole bunch of people that work in the theater and acting, I kept being in the restaurant because it was a way to make money, and I always sort of felt at home there. And so did that right through. I mean, even through our first project, all of my friends at the time in Vancouver were right around the age where they started to be able to maybe launch their own things. And
so how did you jump from like acting to designing spaces though?
Well, I did some design on the side right from when I was maybe 16. I'd refinished some furniture, and I was always kind of making
like hands-on type of it.
Yeah. And I worked with a roommate of mine was a carpenter in university, and so we would obviously be working on building sets and things like that. And so and then we did that through university. I worked with him a little bit, stayed in the restaurants, and I just always felt I could help, because I would be working in these restaurants and I would see that there was a sort of narrative, there was a soul underneath it, but they had a hard time telling that story through the built environment and and aligning it with the menu and how the guest experience would be. And from my background in theater, I just always felt when I was in those spaces that if we could somehow marry these things and have them communicating with one another and sort of supporting and enhancing one another, you know, from the music to the art on the walls to the
it is a production
yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah. And so I was dabbling with it all the way through, and I always thought, you know, I'll work as an actor, and the best version for me will be I'll have my own little, you know, design shop on the side, or I'll help my friends in some way by helping them and design. But it didn't shake down that way. I had some friends that were gonna, you know, make their own restaurants, and I had to convince them that they should take a risk by working with me. And frankly, in those old days, I was putting on a tool belt and going to the job site and figuring out how to, you know, make lights and you know, make mirrors and so it was very, very hands-on but really looking at it from the point of view of how do you make this world come alive.
But I understand that you were hands-on, and this is an invaluable, of course, learning situation, but you were able to kind of express vision through what you were doing, or express your or bring your ideas forth.
Yeah, and we would do that through, you know, shared imagery, sketches, talking to, bringing trades in, working with craftspeople and trades to say, okay, here's an idea. Let's sort of continue to communicate back and forth and try some things until we could realize it. And so it was with whatever tools were sort of at my disposal at the time. And then, and yeah, I mean, that's how I started, and a whole bunch.
I think that's a really, really important thing to kind of understand if you're just starting out in this business, that it really, really is teamwork, and you're as good as your weakest link. You know, I know it's a cliche, but like, you know, you can learn a lot from trades people, from contractors, from people. Like, you need to learn from these people, you know, in order to kind of design intelligently, you know, and kind of understand what you're doing and what you're asking and how you're going to go through that process. I always found that it's interesting to go to shops and see how things are done, or go to sites. I know that early on in my own career, I spent all my time in shops and sites.
Yeah, and you know, you learn very early on that it's not one direction. It's a very reciprocal process where you learn the limitations of the material, or, you know, that there's many steps to realize something. So it has a impact on timing or cost. And you just get very acutely aware of what it takes to actualize things that you've manifest in your brain. And I think was invaluable for me early days. And I think that's something I mean, I have a few questions for you sort of about that specifically. And because I know that from talking to you on other occasions that you sort of cut your teeth doing it that way as well. And one of the things I'm curious about is how have you been able to maintain or continue and evolve that? Because when you look at your work that you just went through, you could see that there's a connectivity to how you see things and how you sort of edit, and how you use lighting, and how you know, obviously engineer the plans. But one of the main things is that you're doing bespoke things in all of these things, and it's from a low budget project all the way to a, you know, Marcus and the Four Seasons stuff, where clearly those are different scales and budgets, but it's still very bespoke in many respects. So how did you keep that continuity? How do you keep that alive in your practice these days?
I mean, this is one of the challenges. I think we've touched upon this one in our private conversations, but like one of the challenges of growing, you know, because I started off, you know, basically we were 2 or 3 for the longest time. And then at some point, things started kind of coming in, and we were, we grew. And so when you grow, one of the hard things, or one of the hardest things, is kind of maintaining that element of kind of like, that attention to detail, and that, the love that you kind of give to every situation. And so, the big challenge for me now is to, how do I kind of like share my own experience in a cogent and kind of intelligible way that's digestible, and it's very hard to do. I have to admit, like, I don't feel that I'm that good at it. But I feel like if I have a bit of kinship with the people, and it is the case that I've been extremely lucky to be surrounded by talented and really able and smart people that kind of picked up on a lot of stuff, but also brought a lot to the table. But it's still a challenge to kind of maintain our original DNA and go into the bigger projects, and because there's a lot of like logistic around, but I think like, and this is what I see in your work, and this is why I feel like we have connection, is that there's a real will to create a sense of place, give a real soul, to it. And I think this is something that you can't bullshit. Like, it's just like, sometimes you do it better than other times, I have to admit. Like, it's easier to do in existing spaces than it is to build out from scratch. But like, I think like it's an approach where, there's stuff that's learned, but there's stuff where you keep your sensitivity, and I think like, for me, I always keep questioning myself, but also asking people on my team, like this is all good, but like, does it feel right? And I think going back to that constantly, does it feel right? Does it feel right? Like, are we on track? And you're always kind of adjusting until you have a project. And then, like, I don't think anything's perfect. Like, we aim for 80%, and it's just like, and it's really good. Like, but if you manage to engineer the emotional component of the project properly, I think you win. It doesn't matter if it's perfect,
Yeah, I agree. I often talk with other designers or architects, and they say, "Oh, I don't like to go to the spaces that I design because I see a thing that's wrong, or that's wrong, or it doesn't it's not perfect."
Yeah.
And that stuff actually doesn't bother me at all. If it feels off, or if it's not, or if it doesn't seem like that, like socially things are clicking, or that the vibe's right, or, truthfully, if the staff, is fucking around with the lights or whatever, and it's ruining the atmosphere, then certainly that makes me feel uncomfortable. But I actually, try to make sure that and I think our group is keen on this as well, because we do that as well, trying to sort of port ourselves into the middle of what that place is going to feel like. And it's one of the things that I liked about how your space planning goes, is that you're looking at the different experience in this one area versus how somebody should experience it in another area, and maybe seeing like ways that those people that are inhabiting your world are connecting with one another. And so when you start thinking of it in that way, it becomes very clear to me why narrative and storytelling and my background fits into this kind of work, because that's exactly how we would think when we were working in the theater. And it's also a very cinematic way of thinking. And I think,
there's a theatrical aspect to that, but also I think what's interesting about like because there's also like a very real component. It's not scripted,
Yeah,
so
that's right.
you're, and it's really interesting when like when I work on the floor plan and I'm planning out the space, I really try to kind of project myself into the plan. I'm like, if I'm sitting here, what am I seeing? Who am I connected to? Like, how am I interacting with my neighbor? Like, and how am I interacting with the staff? And like, will I want to? And so, like as a kind of rule of thumb thing, like we always try to look at the plan and we're like, what's the worst seat in the house? How can we make it the best seat in the house? And in that sense, like, there's different kind of tricks to be able, or different kind of strategies to get to that point. But at the end of the day, like there's nothing lies. Like if you're in there and and I think this is, for me anyways, like I know I've been successful or not. If people are like, tell me, oh, this feels like this has been here forever. Or, like they don't need to notice all the details. Like they feel good, but they don't know why. And that's fine. Because, but I also think like, and this is where I think we had connection too, is that, we're acting on these small spaces, very immersive. And I I got into like, normally like after, UQAM, you would go on to architecture school and you do this, but I stayed here because I love the scale. Like I really love the fact that we are completely immersive and that we can control experience, and propose a way of being, of existing within, a confined, set of spatial kind of parameters. And so, but there's also like, I thought for me, and I think this is important for you too, is like, there's also for me, like, there's something like about the city, and acting on the city, in the sense that like, and this is something that's almost selfish in a way, because like I go out of my house, I grab a coffee, I go for lunch, and all these things, like these experiences, like for me are very profoundly kind of influenced by a lot of trips that I take. But I love kind of the kind of European approach to these things, where there's like casual eateries and you can have a drink there and blah, blah, blah. And I just don't think that there was enough of this in Montreal. And for me to kind of like make sure that like we have like these places that kind of anchor the city and anchor the experience of the city, is really still to this day is kind of like such an important component of like the work that we're doing, because like a lot of people that come here, this is what they experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, like it's funny because I spent a lot of time in Montreal when I was going to school in Toronto, and I had friends that were in school there, and truthfully, on the Canadian city kind of map, Montreal has a much better cultural and social fabric and connection and a lineage and that stuff. And so you can imagine, and I don't mean to dog Vancouver, because it's an amazing place to live. And from an urban design and from the pedigree of architecture standpoint, it's a remarkable city. But when I moved here, I just felt vacant from that more sort of loose, less sort of less cleaned up, like sort of everything felt a little prescriptive. Everything felt a little too clean. Like it almost felt like, you were always needed to show how much money you had in every restaurant design in some respect. And a lot of the thinking that helped inform our early projects were, how do we make some of our spaces feel like they'd be at home in say, the Kensington Market area of Toronto, or in Montreal, where we spent so much time. And And it was really just about trying to introduce those kinds of spots that just felt,
the opportunity. That I think, like, like that, like on a like on a city scale, or on a neighborhood scale, I should say, like these spots where you kind of meet people, and you kind of, you exist in a social, setting. For me, like, there weren't enough of these. I thought, like, and then I was like, okay, so once you're there, how do you engineer it so people actually kind of, kind of, like, talk to each other and, connect. And I always, like, was always very, very fascinated by a lot of the European cities that I visited, because, you'd always have kind of like the corner spot, and there'd be like, the dog and the old lady and the other people having drinks and young people. And, I felt like kind of like on a social, from a social standpoint, it was less segregated, even though Europe seems very segregated in other ways. Like the corner bistro or the corner, spot, always kind of has this really, really important social function. And, for me, like, if we can do more of this, it's just going to serve the community better. Like, from a, I think, like, especially these days, and it's funny because, like, I'm not talking about the pandemic, that's one thing, but I'm talking about kind of technology, where connecting has become kind of like a very, very, important component. I think, like, I see, we weren't an obvious choice for Four Seasons and Marcus as a design firm. There's some other, Four Seasons deals with kind of like these international brand names, Jabu Puschelberg and Gilles Boissier and blah, blah, blah. Gilles Boissier actually designed the hotel with a local architect here, Philippe Azan, who's an excellent architect, but they designed the hotel proper. But we were, and so the owner of the hotel really insisted that it was us, because they really wanted to make the social spaces dynamic. They really wanted a real social hub. And so in that sense, like, we had honed our skills on that level for many years. I have to say, like, this is one thing that I'm proud of our practice, is that we've had, like, there's an equation between kind of like that element and social and commercial success, which I'm super happy that that's the case, because if not, we wouldn't have a business.
Well, that's another question that I had for you, because I actually think this is really important for young designers to understand, is that we've spent a lot of time talking about this,
lofty,
this dreamscape of how you sort of manifest that in a space, but that has to be done in equilibrium with the business goals. And as you know, there's an sort of young first time business person versus somebody that's got 3 or 4 versus somebody that's an asset manager or has a lot of property, and those dynamics change. But somebody coming into this work, a really important thing for them to know is how to be empathetic, first of all, to who you're making this for, both the guest and at the same time the client, and understand what that client's success looks like for them as a business. And that's a hard thing to learn.
You're talking about empathy, and I 100% agree. And I think also, like, as part of empathy, like on a more concrete level, like just listening. Like, I know it sounds stupid, but I know I see this all the time. Like, with, like, if you're eager and young designer, that's fantastic. But if you're not kind of like listening for cues and kind of really, really kind of, and kind of receiving information, you're probably not going to do a good project because you haven't understood kind of like the dynamics that are at play and the interests that your client has. So I think that that's spot on. Like our biggest selling point, I think, is the fact that like all of the projects that we've designed have been commercially successful.
Yeah.
And I can affirm that. Like it's, and so of course, like, you know, once you have that track record, blah, 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 it's easy to go into a meeting and, you know, and state that, and, you know, you can back it up with something. But when you're not there yet, like there's, you know, but there is, like, for me, the interesting thing is that, you know, kind of like the artistic and the lofty kind of, you know, pursuit or you know, intentions and activate, like, and actually being able to translate that into kind of a concrete real project, you know, that makes sense within, you know, its own parameters, time, budgets, blah, 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 and all of that stuff, and people. And then that, if you manage to do that properly, it equates to commercial success most of, like, almost all of the time. So in that sense, like, there is a reason, like a real kind of like logical commercial logic behind kind of like trying to, you know, bring this forth, which was not like, when we started off, Montreal was completely depressed. So like economically, it's a very, very hard sell. You know, people didn't want to invest, you know, and they're like, why are we going to do this? Like, we got some walls and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, you know, so it was hard at first, for the first couple of years, because there's no interest in kind of pursuing this. Now it's kind of a given, you know, and it's so competitive, and it's so like, you need that. But how do you approach it intelligently, you know, the projects? I think that's, you know, I think we're, of course, running similar types of business. We have the similar types of challenges, I think.
We're, you know, we're sort of obsessed with those ideas as well, specifically for, like you said, places that are going to help activate a neighborhood, and none of it matters if they're not around for a while.
Exactly.
And you know what I think is really important, though, is how you said that idea of listening and getting really good at that, really good at hearing, especially if a client's coming to the table and they've got quite a bit of experience and they've got the credibility to do what they've got to do. They might not have all of the language to tell you what they want, but there's always going to be a bunch of little cues in there that it's going to really give you a roadmap for how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that is a major tool for anyone coming into a design practice like this, to be able to really have that sort of level of empathy for those people, and see how to then support building something for them. That's the other thing, is being very cognizant that the project it's not for the designer. It's not for our portfolio. It's not about how it looks in a photograph later on.
I really like what you're saying there, because like, I mean, I've been trying to kind of break this idea of the capricious designer, you know, that comes in and just kind of like, yes, it must be this way, and doesn't, you know, kind of give a shit about anything. And it's like, and I don't think that's a good way to approach stuff. Like, you know, like, you need to understand and empathize and kind of get into the other people's lives and be a positive force, you know, and be kind of like, you know, try to, like, if you listen properly and you make them a project where you went beyond what they expected, but within stuff that they told you, like, that's it. Like, you have a client for life there, because they, you know, you really, really kind of translated a lot of the stuff that they've been. So yeah, I try to listen to the small stuff too, I gotta say. Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
The,
I think
the
it's
thing, oh, it's time to go.
I don't know. Guillaume, is it time to go? I don't know, Guillaume.
He's left. He's already gone.
Yeah, really nice, guys. Yeah, we could go with a couple of questions. I don't know if you noticed, but we have quite a few actually. I'm going to mix and match some of the questions because I think some questions are related. I'm going to mix and match. The first question I'm going to ask, and because a lot of people that listening to us are students that they are going to graduate this year and they're going to start working next year. Would you change or would you do something differently about how you started? Because both of you are very entrepreneur. You start from scratch. Would you change the way you learn about doing design? And this is also, I'm going to connect that question to a question that Yasmin asked. Do you think it is mandatory to obtain a design degree?
It's funny to say this in the...
And how valuable is... And the question switched to how valuable is the experience in another domain in the design world?
Craig?
Okay, well, I mean, like, here's my thing. As I use the work that I did during my BFA in the theater, I use that all the time. It's the foundation of our entire process. It's likely a bit of a different process, but so it's the foundation of the entire process. Of course, that's not a architecture or design degree from a technical sense. So I would say if you're doing things for the right reason, and that's to sort of find your own personal outlet, and you're really working to learn about what makes you exceptional and what makes you happy, and education is a conduit to that, I think it's going to serve anybody. Now, of course, your education is never going to be the thing that makes you professionally successful. That's going to come from how you apply yourself in your profession. I think one of the questions I had for you, Zébulon, was essentially how hard was it to get through those early years? How much work did it take? How confusing was it? Because if it was anything like the way it was for me, it was a real grind. And so I think that sort of helps answer this question to a degree.
Yeah, I think I had the same experience. It took literally like 10 years before we got any kind of like traction or, and so I have to say, like, for myself, I was very kind of obstinate about not going to work for anybody. So I had to pay for that somehow, and maybe to your point, Guillaume, maybe if I had kind of gone to work for an office for a couple of years, I would have saved a tremendous amount of pain and time just learning just how to be a professional, which took me forever. And actually, I owe it to one of my partners down the line. This girl, Jennifer Alderson, really, we partnered up in one of the early firms that I had, and she really taught me how to be a professional. So I think, like, from an education standpoint, I don't think it's never wasted. Like, there's no, I think it's worth having diploma. I don't know, it depends what you're going to do with it. And it depends, like, I don't know that, like, entrepreneurial, kind of pursuits is for everybody. Also, I think you have to be able to live with a lot of uncertainty. You have to be able to kind of, shoulder stress pretty well, I think. But there are payoffs. So, it's hard to say. I think it's good to know who you are and what you're going to go and what you can what kind of you can tolerate. If you're just going to go into business, well, nobody's going to ever ask you for your diploma unless you're an architect, and then you have professional responsibility, of course. But if you're going to for a job, then you will be asked, like we do, so what's your education, and so when people want to come and work for us, this is part of the process, your education, your CV, your portfolio. So yeah, I think that one other thing, maybe for Guillaume, I wish I had spent a bit more time kind of enjoying and kind of enjoying the school experience. I think I was very, very urgent and early on trying to get stuff done in the real world, and I was very, very anxious, because these were kind of economically depressed times, and I really wanted to work in this, and so I felt like I had to get a head start. I don't think the conditions are like that anymore. Like, it's really a very, very different. Montreal is not at the same place it was 20 years ago. So I think the conditions are pretty good for young designers right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna.
We're trying, like, it's very hard for us to find anybody. Like, everybody's, and I think all the architects and the design firms that I know are looking for people.
That's a pretty good momentum to the student to go out, actually. Yeah. Next question from Ariane, and it's you partially answered that question, but there's some underline to go deeper in that. How do you stay authentic and succeed in recreating this European and sensitive dynamic? I'm thinking about Bar Isabelle that I actually really liked. It's one of my favorite places in Toronto. An example of authenticity in balance. Where do you start in your creative process in order to stay true to yourself and your idea? And I'd like to add to the last sentence, true to yourself and your idea, because Craig, you talked about empathy and the people, like the owner of the place. So I think there's something in there, like you have an idea, you have the person you work for, and how do you balance everything? Where the inspiration comes and how it blends together?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we were talking about that, I was thinking that there's an equal and opposite component, right? Which is maintaining the integrity of the ideas and a path that you've sort of see to making this stuff come manifest, and that's why you're hired in the first place. So it really is. Like anything else that's worthwhile is finding the equilibrium, is where you're able to listen to your client, be empathetic to what their business needs are, understand and sort of try to transport yourself into that that user experience. And that doesn't matter if you're designing a restaurant or a spa or a yoga studio or an office or anything. You really should be trying to find yourself in that, and I think if you start from that place, then the rest of the stuff is kind of inputs that helps you guide your path through. And if you're again going back to that sort of touchstone, and Zébulon mentioned that earlier, saying like we keep going back to how should this feel, how should somebody feel here, and again, if you keep bringing inspiration in different things that help you chart a course, you keep going back to how does this feel, and then to another degree, does this serve the benefits of the business that we're trying to support and enhance? Then your ideas are coming from the right place. And so if a client, or for instance, is maybe misconstruing them or they have a difference of opinion, then you have a lot more of a foundation from which to push back intelligently and again empathetically. You really are again trying to fight for the best outcome for for their needs. And I think that's the sort of emotional gymnastics that exists in this kind of thing. I think the folly is if you're dogmatic about saying I have something up here that I want to produce in the world. But I'm going to do it with your money, and and after I walk away, you're going to own this thing and potentially be burdened with it. That's where the misfire comes in.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think, like, you know, I always say kind of like la matière première, you know, the building blocks of what we're doing is always like, I'll never go into a meeting kind of having preconceptions about what we're going to do at the end. You know, it's like you need to follow that path, you know, and this is what I was saying in French in our presentation earlier, like, you know, our practice, and I feel you have the same approach, are profoundly contextual. You know, they have everything to do with the person that is sitting in front of you, the physical, you know, condition of whatever you're going to do, the neighborhood where it's going to be, the budget, the timeline, like everything this is all the stuff that's informing your project, you know, and then you can start kind of having ideas about stuff. Like for me, this is the way I kind of approach it, you know. And I think kind of like the one question I do ask, like that, which is more kind of, you know, kind of driven to myself, is I like, you know, and I think this is an important question to ask. You're like, you know, once you've had these ideas and blah, blah, you're like, would I come here? Like, would I like to be here? Like, does this make any sense? You know, and it's like, and I always ask myself that question, you know, because I think that somehow your own kind of personal compass is very, very helpful, you know.
It sort of also helps you not be having this kind of keeping up with the competition way of looking at things too, right? Just because somebody did something pretty, it doesn't mean that you should make something look like that. And I think one of the things that I'm very happy with is that we've followed our path to realizing projects, and that gives us a more singular outcome, and oftentimes have avoided anything that was a little bit too much of a trend and falling into that trap. Because when we have done that to a degree, I always look back on it and say, well, you missed an opportunity to find something more genuine along the way.
Yeah.
That linked to another question from Joel. He's asking, in the process, how and when the materiality of the project is put in place, and how you communicate it to the client, because you gather the input and you build that project, but now we need to build it. So how you pick the right color, how you picked the right wood, how you pick how
I think like I can kind of, so I have an approach with this, and I'm pretty sure, you know, there's going to be some sort of echo on Craig's side, but like I mentioned in the presentation earlier, if you're doing restaurants, you have to contend with where, you know, and so where, you know, patina or where is, you have to make where your friend. Okay, so things will get banged up, things will get scratched, and will, you know, and so this informs a lot of the choices you need to be making, because like the right material in the right place will either be destroyed or age beautifully, you know. And so if you have an approach, you know, when you're designing these space, like a realistic approach about what's going to happen there and how you can adapt the choice of materials, then you can have places that will beautify over time. Now, when I say beautify, I'm not even saying like just the beauty, but I think there's this really kind of interesting alchemy that happens with material. And if you take material, times wear, and then there's this weird kind of photosynthesis that happens that becomes soul. And it's this weird thing where other people have been there before, and there's scratches, and there's, and if you like in the best kind of case scenario, we're building for 20, 30, 50, whatever years that we're doing, because our proposition will be pertinent over the long run. And so the more the choice of materials is adapted to the longevity, the more memory it can, kind of encompass in itself. And this is the energy of material for me. This is the beauty, like ultimately, like, the master of this, and this is like, this is why I have such an admiration for like Carlos Scarpa's work, is it's material based, kind of soul in the architecture. And so I think like, this brings back to the idea of kind of, we're only transient human beings. Everything we do is transient. Everything we do is a moment. And many other people have come before us, and I think all these spaces where you feel connected to something much bigger. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the best answer.
Okay.
I mean, and I think that if anyone ever has a chance to really study Scarpa's work, then he's the maestro. And we were talking earlier about how to work with trades and how to have that sort of feedback loop between, really making something come to life. He was again, that was a fundamental part of his practice, being, down there working with the trades on how to realize this thing. And it's imbued with every detail. And you're right. You look at it these days now, and the way it patinas, the way those dynamics change with the material, it's magical.
Yeah, that is, yeah. I was in Italy last year or 2 years ago. Yeah, and I went on a Carlos Scarpa. I don't want to call it a pilgrimage, but almost. I went to visit all the projects, or almost all the projects, and I have to say I've never seen it's way better in real life than it is in pictures, and it's already awesome in pictures.
That's a great trip.
Yeah.
Quick question. Pandemic, did it change your point of view on project, or for you it just it just a moment and everything's going to be all right after? It's a question from Elise.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a short answer. I think I don't think it's easiest to say. I think we're still in the eye of the storm on that, but I think it's going to change. It's going to change a lot of stuff. I'm hoping that what I hope for is that restaurants and places where people socialize, I hope that we'll be able to, return as much as we can to what their, social service of that thing is, which is enhancing how people connect and mark moments in their life. So I really hope it doesn't have too profound effect there. I think it's going to be crazy for office and downtowns and a lot of stuff like that. And I think there'll be a bunch of reinvention, but I'm really hoping that restaurants will be able to sort of get back to, and maybe people will sort of reinforce that's a really strong need, and there'll be a return to that.
So you're preferring more for the année folle?
I think like there's this might be the most epic summer ever. Possible. I don't know. We'll see.
That's what we all wish for, actually.
Yeah, let's wish for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can keep going with the question, or like as you wish.
I mean,
I do have a personal question that I'm going to ask. It's about, okay, I know you told us that all your projects are successful. Zébulon, you told us at the beginning that your first project, they actually dismantle it. How do you feel about, I don't know, Craig, if it happened to you, how do you feel? Because here in Montreal, we have the designer Luc Laporte, who designed many of the greatest place, restaurant at and particular era, and many of the places he designed, they don't exist anymore. But how do you feel when one of the space you designed disappear? Did it happen to you? And yeah,
and just a short word about Luc Laporte. So Luc Laporte is Craig, you may or may not know this, but he's the one who designed l'Express and Le Méac, and and if there's one person that made me want to do this in life, that's for sure him. I used to go there as a kid, and they're still there. L'Express has not changed a iota from what it was, when it opened in 1980. And so it's a shame for something like l'Express, or that when it disappears, because it has real kind of pertinence over the long run. And so there's a lot of the spaces that he did that I wish Lux was still around, and so Lux was this kind of like great, amazing kind of multifunctional space on Saint Laurent Boulevard in Milan. Now it's a production studio or whatever it is, but it used to be this amazing public space, really unique. And so sometimes I don't feel that all our projects are at that level, that they should kind of go on forever. I'm tending towards that. I'm hoping I get there one day. I think it's one of the characteristics of what we do that you can I feel like I'm only starting at this point to get a bit good at what I'm doing. And it's not like, and there's so I'm very kind of, know that there's a lot of complexity and information and blah, 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 and experience that goes into making a really excellent project. Luc Laporte was from the school of Gustave Eiffel, and there's a big tradition of the type of design and architecture that he was doing. He benefited from this school, and he was a very good porte-étendard of this approach, well, not very good. He was an amazing porte-étendard of that school in Montreal, and created a whole universe and characterized what the city was about at that time. The design dynamics are very, very different, I think, now, but there would still be space for this. I always think that there will always be a space for this. But I don't have the ambition for all the projects that they're going to be there forever. I hope so at some point, that we do something, that stays there. And, and for us, kind of like the closest example is funny because it's Buvette. Buvette's been there for, 2008, so 13 years now, and it hasn't changed at all. And it's very rare. Sometimes people will go in and make modifications or whatever, but Buvette is exactly the way it was when it opened.
Yeah, I mean, it breaks my heart when other places that I've that I've sort of spent a lot of time in, and that have been inspiring for me. I mean, I don't most of our places are still around too. There's been a few that have gone by the wayside, and some of them I you know, hurts a little more than others, but I think the goal is to be making places that have that ability to be that meaningful to other people. And I don't think that there's a solution for that, because I think we work within, you know, it's commerce, you know, these are half the time, these are leasable spaces. Buildings are going to get bought and sold, and the ownership's going to change. People are going to die, you know, so I'm not under the illusion that anything is permanent, but I think the idea that some people down the line, and, you know, even these days, saying that, you know, those places are really important to us, and lots of things, meaningful experiences happened along our sort of journey, you know, and that's why that's how we got into this in the first place, is to be making places like that. And I know, like, Zébulon co-owns a few restaurants and event spaces as well, and that's why I got into that side of it as well. It's because we really believe that we love them, I guess.
Yeah, no. I like, honestly, like, you know, I feel it that, like, in our culture, the function, you know, like the social function of these places cannot be replaced. You know, you were talking about the pandemic and hoping to get back to that. I completely share that sentiment, because we need this. Like, I like, you know, I think, like, that's also kind of going back to kind of like when you're starting to understand, you know, what you're dealing with, is that you're really, at the end of the day, dealing with a very, very fundamental human need. You know, and this is what we're trying to give life to, you know, and it's just like, so I think getting back to that is really, really important, because we are social animals. We need to be social somewhere, you know, and it's just like, and so, like, you know, I in French, I would say, you know, we propose a way to be together. And, you know, and to your point, like, if people love these places, they go to them, if they're part of their lives, then you've actually made a contribution. And so, yes, I hope, like, I agree with you. I think, like, there's so much effort that goes into every single project that you hope it's going to last forever, you know?
And maybe a last question of Dorsa. And it's a tricky question. If you were given the budget and freedom to build any kind of space in Vancouver and Montreal, what would it be?
This is funny. I'm going to send this one to you, because I actually had something written down about this. I want to know your perspective on budget and how you would deploy that, and, you know, because it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah, there's two answers to that. So the first answer is I would buy Lux and just make it happen again.
Oh yeah.
And I wouldn't even design it. I just do, like, as is, like, this place can exist. But I don't think projects that are anchored in that are not anchored in real commercial you know, parameters make sense. Like, we see these all the time. People who have a lot of money and want to do their thing and blah, 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 and then they, you know, they go overboard on a bunch of stuff. These places do not continue to exist. They typically are going to go out of business. And so if you're not driven by, like, the commercial logic has its benefits, you know, and it's just like, and to me, like, being real and being kind of, you know, consequential and pertinent is part of that, is being kind of in a real economic logic. So I don't know, like, I don't know if it makes sense to make a project with no limits and no boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's sort of why I wanted to ask you that earlier, because I agree. I think it for having those constraints, right? So what we do is always create constraints where they don't exist when you're trying to essentially assemble a world, and having the constraints of a budget enforces you to allocate a hierarchy of importance, and you start to understand where the big moments need to be, where you need to spend the money appropriately. You need to, and it also helps you do something that is often the most challenging thing. It's where to edit. And so look, often you always want a little more. That would be the right way to do it, is get started and then give us 15% more halfway through. Like that.
I think that's a good point. Like, design, like any creative act, is a process of elimination of the possibles. And so, as you take away, you need to have kind of a certain amount of parameters that already exist, because if not, you're just gonna go crazy. And then it's like Dubai, like it's just like soulless. So I think like there's I don't know, it's an interesting question, because like everybody wants that in a way. And I remember and I try to make this anecdote short, but I was invited to be a critique for définissant en architecture at the University of Sherbrooke, like finishing architecture students. And they had two projects. Like one of the, and this was with Gilles Thibault. He invited me to come and, and do the critique of these projects. And so they had, it was very, very interesting. They had one project with no constraints, and it was on this land and they could do whatever they want. And they had to do the same exact program, but do it. And they went to Tokyo, and they had the site was extremely constraining. And invariably it was like all the projects, all the better projects were the Tokyo projects, invariably. And so you see how constraint is necessary for design.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a truism for how you actually accomplish something. I will say, similar to Zébulon's comment about Lux, we have some spots here like where real estate's prohibitively expensive in Vancouver. So, money would be good in order to, have more independent things in more prominent places. So, we really struggle with that. We really struggle for trying to ensure that this city doesn't become just a playground for, affluent people. And that really has a way of eroding a culture. There's a property here called the Sylvia Hotel, which is an old famous hotel on the west part of the city. And that's one where it would be my sort of Lux would, repurpose that entire thing. But it would be, again, not to make it look any more designed. It really would just be to reintroduce it in a way.
Nice. Maybe I lied. Because Mathieu Leclerc asked a question, and he's got me about light. I'm really into light. So, and I'm going to shorten this question. How light is important in your work? How do you manage the light? How you use it? How you how it's a material as all the other material for you?
Zeb, why don't I go quick, because I want to hear your answer to this one, actually, in a pretty fulsome way. I'm very curious about this from your standpoint. But for me, it's obviously majorly important. It would be one of those things where if you had the opposite question about the budget thing, that if you only had a tiny bit of money, what would you spend your money on? And the answer would invariably be like comfortable furniture and good lighting. And because you could make something remarkable with very few things like that, and light can be, it can paint the entire meaning and emotional sort of quality of a project. So it's incredibly important, and it's also incredibly difficult to master, because it's technically extremely, challenging. It ends up interfacing with every other aspect of your project, from glazing to your metalwork to your millwork to it's both functional and there to beautify and to sort of paint something emotionally. And so it's a real discipline to stay committed to understanding it, and then staying educated on how much it's technology is evolving. And so I would say it's just an ongoing learning experience, and for us, I'm trying to think of the other aspect, which is the level of customization and collaborations that you can engage in, where you could, oftentimes leverage some expertise from some other people. I mean, we have a and light out here, like Omer Arbels does some remarkable stuff, and I know there's Lambert Fil out of Montreal, and I think that's another opportunity to have those pieces become almost like a little poetic piece of language in and of themselves, where they're where the light just kind of shows you how to look at them as an artifact in some way. And so I think it's one of those things where the rabbit hole goes very, very deep.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most important thing. That's it. Like, I agree. Like, and it doesn't have to be good light. Is the thing. The weird thing is like, it just needs to be appropriate. So like, I have an example of that, like in the sense that, okay, so we built this little bakery called, it's named Hofkelston on Saint Laurent Boulevard, right? And so the idea behind that one, Hofkelston is, my friend Jeffrey Finkelstein, was trained as a chef, worked in like all the best kitchens, per se, and El Bulli and blah blah blah, and came back to Montreal, had no money, and started baking bread like in his mom's in his mom's kitchen, and then he slowly started kind of providing bread for all the best restaurants in Montreal, Joe Beef, Nora Gray, blah blah blah, like and kind of created this reputation for himself. So we went, like, he approached me to design his bakery, and it's on Saint Laurent Boulevard near Montréal. And there's a tradition of immigration on the boulevard. He's from a Jewish background, and he's doing this really interesting kind of new take on Jewish food, and he's doing Jewish kind of baking and whatnot. So we really wanted to emulate some of the older spots on the street, like kind of like the legacy spots and all the strata of like kind of like different immigration, whether it be Jewish or Slovenian or whatever, and just like, and so a lot of these spots are like kind of like you go and you grab a sausage sandwich and you eat it standing up at this minuscule little counter. And that's it. That's the experience. And I grew up in that area. So we used to go there and do that. And so I was like, we can't do sexy lighting here. Like, forget it. Like, so we just like got a neon tube, and that's what's hanging over the, over the communal table that's there where people are eating their little sandwiches, and that's it, because that's the experience. So, I mean, so that's one aspect. Then, then there's like the Marcus stuff, where like there's a ton of lighting, and it's all controlled by blah, blah. And lighting has gotten, to your point, Craig, like it's gotten extremely technical, especially since we've switched to LED, where there's a lot of like technical issues, and we've been fighting with everybody to get it more warm, you know, like LED has been super challenging because it was just a buzzkill in many cases. You know, so we go down to temperatures like 1800K, you know, which is basically yellow. But if you want to imitate, if you want to be close to kind of like incandescent kind of, you know, light bulbs, which is, you know, for anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's like the Edison kind of filament bulbs, or, you know, those regular white bulbs that you have at home. In order to emit, like to kind of simulate that, you need to have dim to warm capabilities, and you need to have a bunch of, you know, different aspects. So it gets very technical. When we do projects now, like we do bigger kind of projects, we use dim to warm everywhere. We use, you know, we can specify now kind of temperatures for lighting. And it's always a combination, like in the more kind of luxe projects, I would say, it's all about layering, you know. And one of the tricks, I gotta say, like there are tricks, like, is to put as much lighting close to the ground as you possibly can. So glow, you know, like there's, and not seeing the light source.
Yeah.
So you really want to create a lot of glow and not know where the light is from, and that creates a sense of magic, you know, and, you know, a sense of presence, you know, in the Peter Zumthor sense, you know, of presence of space or whatever. And so I think, you know, so these are tricks that we use kind of regularly to, but we do on the bigger projects now have lighting consultants, because interfacing, you know, systems that kind of control light, you know, which are fantastic. You know, if you can set your night moods, your day moods, and they just transition, and they adapt to kind of like the time of year you're in. So, you know, it's great, but it's very complex. So that's that. So, you know, and then you were saying, like, I think the last thing is lighting as an object. I think that there's tremendous potential for poetry there, you know, and I can leave it at that.
It's funny because Daniel on his follow-up is saying also it's tricky because you have to meet your ASHRAE calculations as well. So that's the one thing that LED does help you with, right? And once you're able to learn
on new projects, we have, like, you know, Marcus at Four Seasons has almost no incandescent lighting.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all LED. And many of the new projects that we're working on are like 100% LED, or you'll have once in a while, like one kind of vintage fixture or something, you know, that has kind of an incandescent, but it's really for decorative purposes, but you don't light with it. Like
that's what we end up doing.
That boat is like, that ship has sailed, we're somewhere else.
We say we're going to go on first dibs or whatever and buy, you know, three fixtures that aren't on the building permit set, and sometimes they go in, they got to go in sneakily after the fact, and you get your one or two incandescent fixtures in there.
Yeah, exactly. No, but that's what happens, you know. And it's just like, and then like
Daniel's saying, no, never do that.
I
didn't say it. I don't do that.
For lighting, like, we're tremendously lucky here in Montreal, and these are friends of mine, so I'm not like, you know, but Samuel Lambert and Lambert et Fils have been really kind of a driving force in lighting and lighting design. I think Guillaume has designed a series of lights for them. We're working with them. They've managed to position themselves internationally as a really good, credible brand. They just opened this beautiful showroom in New York. I mean, they've been a really dynamic driving force for the design community locally. You know, we're putting on, I guess I can almost maybe kind of complete with this, we're putting on a show of local designers, you know, with this organization that we've created called the Canadian Creative Collective. So it's the CCC. We're actually, and this is, I'm gonna take this opportunity, Greg, to invite you to be a member with us. We're trying to promote Canadian design internationally. We with our event that we're just about to put on right now called Fictions, we made the cover story of Wallpaper last month. We've gotten a lot of really, really excellent media coverage for this. We're really, really happy. And Guillaume is one of the participants. I am, Lambert et Fils, and some other excellent, really great designers, local designers. And we're looking to make this pan-Canadian. So we're gonna invite people such as yourselves to come and join us and to show the rest of the world what we're capable of.
Amazing. Are you doing a show?
It's virtual. We had to adapt. So originally it was planned to be a physical show in Milan, curated by Nicolas Bellavance-Lecomte, who's a very very famous curator in Milan for design, collectible design and high-end type of stuff. So we were very lucky. We had the dream team to put on this show. We had a venue, and then the pandemic hit, and I actually traveled to New York to go and seek out an alternate space to put on the show in New York, and then the pandemic hit in New York. So we brought everything back to Montreal, and we're just going to launch this event very, very shortly with a short film and a virtual event and all sorts of stuff. Made by a lot of talented people. I think I'm very, very excited about it.
Amazing.
Nice. I feel we could go on and on and on.
Yeah, we're actually like a full hour more.
Yeah. We just passed. So I think we're gonna. I don't know if you agree. We could end it here. I have so many questions about like product design and stuff for you, but no, okay, well, let's stop it here. So I'm just gonna close. Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you very much, Zébulon. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
En fait,
thanks, Craig, for accepting my invitation.
Yeah,
this was really fun, guys. I really appreciate it.
It's amazing. Merci en fait à la direction de l'école de design, Maurice Cloutier, au comité de rayonnement, Michel Amandine. Merci à Louis-Charles Lanier qui est en charge, qui a pris en charge cette série de conférences. Merci à David Allard-Martin aussi qui est la personne qui se cache derrière la technique de ces conférences. Et j'aimerais vous inviter à la prochaine conférence, le 1er avril prochain, avec Mélissa Mongia. Mélissa Mongia, pour ceux qui ne la connaissent pas, elle est associée dans le studio Daily tous les jours. Et ils sont à fond dans le design d'interaction. Bref, on ne connaît pas encore son invité. On a très, très hâte. Dès qu'on le connaît, on vous le communique. Donc, j'aimerais dire au revoir et à bientôt à tout le monde. Merci beaucoup d'avoir été là ce soir.
Merci.
Ciao.
Bye.